Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Handpicked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
Your kids could get free or low-cost health coverage from Medicaid or CHIP. Even if you've applied before, they may be eligible now. Kids up to age 19 are covered for checkups, vaccines, dentist visits, hospital care, and more. And if they already have Medicaid or CHIP, remember to renew every year. Visit insurekidsnow.gov or call 877-KIDS-NOW. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. The Suns officially announced their coach today and had a press conference with him. My name is Mike, here with Sam. Sam, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. A new era of Suns basketball has officially begun. At least that's what Frank Vogel himself said at the presser today. And these days are always fun. The coronations, if you will, are always fun. Toxic discourse is kept to a minimum. It's the start of a new era. We get to think positive things, be optimistic, and hope the best for the future. So we'll try and break down what interesting tidbits there were that came out of that. Obviously, a lot of talking from him, a little bit from James Jones too.
It actually does feel like a new era has begun now, right? Well, in some cases, it hasn't felt like that in the past. I don't know. But in this case, the combination of a brand new coaching staff, the first season, full season with a new owner, trading half the team for Kevin Durant, and now looking down the barrel of championship or bust with essentially a new roster outside of Devin Booker, which is the most likely scenario. It feels like a new era to me. This is like, we started the podcast, one season of Igor Kokoshkov, then Monty came. That felt like the start of a new era. We had the Monty era, and now it's the Kevin Durant era. Frank Vogel's in
not
there,
even
but,
the Frank.
It's definitely the Kevin Durant era.
He doesn't have the right for it to be the Frank Vogel era. Look, we talked about last week how Monty was the first Suns coach to make it 4 seasons since someone in the 80s. I forget exactly who, but it was a long time. So, anytime you spend 4 years with a team, I think it's only fair to call that an era. That being said, for me, like on a personal level, what will feel the most like a new era is if the Suns ultimately do move on from DeAndre Ayton this summer. We don't know that yet, but
Chris Paul too, I think would be a big one.
Chris Paul would be a huge one too. For me, it's just the fact that, like, speaking personally, meta about our podcast for a second, the first episode of our podcast was celebrating the fact that DeAndre Ayton was drafted by the Suns. That would very much feel surreal and like closing the book on something, both in terms of Suns history and also in terms of our personal lives. That would be weird. But yeah, it is a new era. It's the Frank Vogel show now, baby. And how did you feel? What were your initial impressions from the press conference today?
I watched it live. Did you watch it live?
Absolutely, of course. What do you take me for? I knew we had to record today.
I wasn't sure if you were busy or not. I watched it live. The very first thought I had was, "Oh, Mat Ishbia is not there." That was my first thought. I thought it would be Matt, James, and Frank on the stage together, but it was just James Jones and Frank Vogel. And James Jones was the first to speak. My next thought was, why did he say the word settled so many times? Because he kept saying they settled on Frank Vogel. And it's like, listen, I know what you mean, James. You interviewed a lot of people, and this is where you landed, and you don't want to insult the other people you interviewed. But just say you're excited to have him. Don't say you settled on him. It just sounds a little dismissive. But that was my first thought. Were you surprised that Mat Ishbia wasn't there?
A little bit. I mean, he's a businessman. He might have some business-related things to attend to. That's the difficult thing about being an NBA owner, right? Is that I don't know. It was during business hours, so I didn't think too much of it. Also, the fact that we got at least an interview from Ishbia on the Burns and Gambo show a couple hours later.
Yeah.
So he did.
Yeah.
We can discuss that if there's interesting things out of that you want to talk about, but. At least he made, somewhat of a public appearance in that sense, and gave his thoughts and about the signing as well.
Yeah, James Jones talked about how they had an extensive search, interviewed a bunch of candidates, which is true. We know about a bunch of them. And then actually Mat Ishbia went on to talk about some of them later on in the day, as you said. And then ended with Frank Vogel. And, I thought this is one of those times of years, I think, where it's important for you and I to just acknowledge how lucky we are to have Gerald and Kellen and Dwayne and people that are out there asking really great questions, things that you and I just don't do. We're able to sort of sit back and listen to them ask great questions to these guys. Yeah, make jokes. And then we can comment on them. But, of course, this is a press conference. So, Frank did his typical I'm excited to be here thing. The Suns have a great team thing. And then the questions began, and I would say half of them were about Ayton. The rest of them were interesting. And that's where we started, I think, right?
Yeah, I think there were only a couple that were really directly about DeAndre Ayton. I remember it was the other interesting thing to me, actually. I don't know that there was any question that I remember Frank, he mentioned Chris Paul's name once, right?
Right.
In the intro bit. But there were a couple, at least, questions about DeAndre Ayton. I don't think there was a question about Chris Paul.
No, I don't think so either.
Kind of puts into your head where Suns fans' thoughts are at the moment. Really, just
or
so
at least
much.
What drives clicks in Suns media right now.
Yeah,
probably
maybe
a little bit.
There's just so much concern about is Frank Vogel and we tried to address this question a little bit last week, but. I don't know. Is he the answer to jumpstart
the Ayton whisperer?
Yes, to jumpstart DeAndre Ayton's career. And I think the big one that people were asking us last week that we tried to address was, does it affect the potential for Ayton to stay? Does it change the thinking essentially at a front office level about is Frank Vogel specifically a guy you bring in because you've decided actually we're good on all the trade ideas, we want this guy back, and we want to try and get the most out of him? I think the answer to that is no. But I don't blame anyone in the media for asking that question again and trying to get a more concise answer.
I think Frank Vogel handled it as well as you can. Right now, the reality of the Suns is they have like 7 guys on the roster, maybe 6 guys on the roster. Like this is Kevin Durant. I have it in front of me actually. Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, DeAndre, and Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, and Cam Payne are the only players that are signed for 23-24.
Yeah, maybe
the rest of the players have, there's like a qualifying offer for Darius Bazley that they're going to decline. Yeah. Ish Wainwright has
could be that 7th
team
guy,
option.
Right?
Yeah, and that's really it. Nobody else is signed onto the Suns. So when you talk about the roster, he only has the opportunity to talk about those guys. I thought he did a good job of, I think he called Kevin Durant and Devin Booker killers. And then the other guys that you're going to talk about, they're not going to ask questions about Cam Payne or Landry Shamet. They're going to ask questions about DeAndre Ayton.
I would have
$32 million next year.
I would have asked the Landry Shamet question, but that's just me. That's why we're not
if he
in
can
there.
turn DeAndre Ayton into the best center in the NBA, can he turn Landry Shamet into Klay Thompson? That's the question that we should have asked. That's the only way. How did you feel about how he answered the Ayton questions?
Yeah, so it's interesting because a lot of the reaction that I saw to it online, well, okay, I was being a bit of a troll today too, but a lot of the reaction I saw online kind of diverged from what I was thinking, because again, I think he was asked about Ayton directly twice, and the first time,
I think 3 times.
Was it 3 times? Okay, I believe you.
Maybe 4 actually. If I didn't watch it again, but I thought about it, but I think maybe 4.
The first time that he was asked about Ayton, I apologize to all of the reporters in the room because I don't remember who these specific questions were from, but the first time he kind of dodged it in the sense that it was a question about talk about Ayton and what he can bring. This might have been Gerald's question, what he can bring to the Suns defense specifically. And he talked about how the big man is always at the center of his defensive scheme, but he talked about it in a very general, vague sense. He did not mention, he might have mentioned Ayton's name, but he did not, it was clear he was not specifically talking about DeAndre Ayton in the way that he was framing it. He was just like, yeah, the big man is very important. Your defense can't go far without buy-in from your big man. And then further on in that response to the question, he kind of transitioned by talking about how he was actually really impressed with the two-way talent of both Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. And that's when he mentioned that actually KD had approached him and said, I can't wait to guard in your system. And so he used it as an opportunity, what was originally a DeAndre Ayton question, to talk about how excited he was to coach Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, essentially. And so that was the first, I wouldn't call it a red flag, but it was a yellow flag for me because I was thinking, okay, so, you're not really talking about Ayton there at all. And like, obviously he's not going to come out and he's not going to crap on guys that are currently on the team. But that didn't feel necessarily like the endorsement to me that I think some other people saw.
Let me read out Kellen's description of the answer to that question. He said, Frank Vogel said he's always had elite rim protectors and noted how important that can be for a team defensively. Allows perimeter defenders to do more, and Vogel believes his scheme is the best at accentuating that. And then he said Kevin Durant told him he can't wait to guard in his system. Yeah, so it's like, how do you feel about DeAndre Ayton? And he's like, well, I love centers who play defense.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
that's
just the answer,
felt
right?
off.
Yeah.
And so then there were more questions about Ayton later. And then I felt that when he was asked to directly address DeAndre Ayton, he gave better answers specifically about DeAndre Ayton. He went on, he talked about how Ayton can essentially return to an all-star level, how he could
restore Ayton to it.
Restore might be the word that he used.
Yeah.
He talked about how he can be a big-time deterrent on defense. He talked about how he was such a problem for him specifically when he coached the Lakers 2 years ago in a series in which Ayton played very well,
he said he probably shot 80%.
Yep, matched up against
like,
Anthony Davis. Also mentioned in that response, though, he said, yeah, there are still areas where he can grow offensively. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, like the fact that he doesn't dribble the ball. So, I thought he was being frank about, well,
how dare
excuse the pun. I did not even mean to do that. But I thought he was being honest in some of his responses about Ayton, not necessarily in a way that feels like a grand endorsement of, yeah, clearly this guy's the Ayton whisperer. We're clearly bringing him back.
Right.
It just didn't read like that to me. Some people are reading into it, but like, what do you expect him to say in an introductory press conference? He's not going to say, this guy sucks and I can't wait for him to get out of here. You got to read between the lines.
Right. It would be completely insane. I thought he handled that the way that any smart coach would have. And and part of that means that none of it was valuable. None of what he said matters because that's how anyone would have answered those questions. I don't think there's any, maybe Doc Rivers wouldn't because Doc Rivers throws guys under the bus a lot, but like most smart coaches don't. They tend to just say, I believe in this player. I believe he can be great. And I think that I can help him be great because that's how they get the job. They say things like that in order to get the job. His sort of philosophy and how he described what he wants to bring to the Suns. I liked he said hard work, toughness, and intelligence. And I liked that idea, that concept of those three things together. Just the idea that you can work harder, you can be tough, but you have to still play smart. And that is sort of his reputation, right? Players that outwork you defensively, but are capable of changing scheme on the fly in the middle of a playoff series if needed. He also talked about, I think he said that you have to outwork the other team. This is actually very similar to something Monty Williams used to say, and I'm sure all coaches say it, but you have to outwork the other team every single night so that when the playoffs come and everybody ratchets up to try to outwork the other team, well, you're already there. The other teams are trying to get to where you already were. And this is all good stuff. It's
Sure.
all good coach stuff that you want to hear. Yeah. We just have to see how it translates onto the court.
Yeah, I think it's good to bring up also, by the way, I thought it was a poignant observation from James Jones in the presser, just the fact that, he had some experience with Frank as well before this hiring, but there was a question of what did you learn about him in the process? He kind of spoke about how they knew Frank's reputation for being a defense-minded coach who expects that toughness, expects that intelligence, expects that grit from his players. And so maybe because of that, he had this preconception as Frank was coming in for the interview that he thought it was going to be like, this really intense guy. And I thought it was an interesting observation just on the part of James. And actually, you can even see it in the presser. That's not who Frank is necessarily at all. Like, I thought his body language was really relaxed. I thought he seemed like a pretty easygoing guy. And for him to be able, if this kind of is his reputation, right? If he's able to walk this line of being a motivator of players who gets players to embrace their tougher side without necessarily being a hard ass all the time, I think that's really valuable in today's NBA, actually. And given some of the egos, if you will, that he'll be dealing with on this team, I think it is really valuable as a skill and really difficult to kind of balance those two sides.
Yeah, it really is. It is kind of funny you're talking about sort of his personality. And I did find myself watching him and relating it back to just you and I and the podcast and thinking about, like you just get so used to these coaches' personalities and stuff. Like we just kind of knew what we were getting from Monty in every press conference at a certain point. You start to understand who they are over time. And I found myself thinking, all right, so this is the voice we're going to be listening to for the next few years. Every single week we're going to hear what he has to say.
Hopefully at least a
few
years.
I would say at least 2 years. I'll give him that. But it's just sort of having that realization that this is the era of basketball we're in now. Frank is the guy. We're going to be hearing this guy talk about this team going forward, and we're going to have to understand what he thinks, what he believes, and what his philosophies are. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out over time. He said the Suns are going to be scrappy as hell, by the way.
Yep.
He used multiple curse words in this.
Yep. I noticed.
In this press conference.
I noticed that you highlighted that. It's important.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah, it's just funny because it's just so different than Monty. It's
what
different.
What would Monty have said? Scrappy as heck?
Scrappy as heck, yeah. Scrappy as all get out. Something like that. Yeah. He also mentioned his connection to Phoenix, and I thought it was funny. His connection to Phoenix was that he was a 76ers fan, and then Charles Barkley was traded to the Suns, and the 76ers sucked, and then the Suns were good, so he kind of watched the Suns after that. I thought that was kind of interesting that he said. I don't know, like you think about him and his options and the opportunities that he had. I mean, he's probably so stoked to coach the Suns right now, right? No Robert Sarver, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and then James Jones, who, I mean, from what we can tell, they're probably going to have a good working relationship. James Jones seems like a GM that likes to be close with his staff and with his coaches. So, he really seems to be happy to be here.
For sure. And, he mentioned obviously the fact he's relocating his family here. I say as I'm not there. He's relocating his family to Phoenix. The weather's great, all that.
Just wait. Give him a month and we'll see what he says about that.
Yeah, you can always.
It's going to get real hot.
You can always escape it for a couple months, right? Well, I guess he'll be hopefully staying in town.
He'll be fine. He'll just have to get used to the air conditioning.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Has he coached in any place this hot? In the past, where was he? LA's not this. LA's not that hot.
Is there any place this hot?
Indiana.
I don't
know if he had coached in like Fizdale, for instance. Who we'll transition to talking about the other news of the week in a little bit. We have some other stuff to cover first, but he coached for a decade in Miami, which is a different type of heat, right? But if you're used to coaching in Miami, then I think you can probably hack it in Phoenix. I don't know.
That's true. He had LA, I guess, is the closest.
Yeah.
It gets pretty hot in LA.
But no, I think the big one is really just the ownership change that you were talking about. And maybe we can use this as our segue to talk about the Ishbia interview that he did on the radio, because Ishbia gave some really encouraging words just about his his complete and utter backing of the team in every kind of financial and even emotional sense. That Mat Ishbia, in fact, it was mentioned by Frank that Mat Ishbia's energy was attractive, was something that stood out to me that he said in the presser as well.
No caffeine.
He said his energy was attractive, and from what little, admittedly, that we've heard from Mat Ishbia so far, but we have heard him in some interviews, he does have this kind of charismatic energy about him because it is so. I mean, he's a little bit of a high-strung guy, but it's so authentic and it's so honest from what we can tell, right? That energy, I could see how that would be attractive for Frank, especially when Ishbia is saying the right words to go along with it.
Let's hold off on the Mat Ishbia interview for just a second because I want to talk about assistant coaches because as it relates to Frank Vogel, because he talked about Dave Fizdale. So the other thing that happened since the last time we recorded is the Suns hired 2 assistant coaches. The first one is Kevin Young, who is now the highest paid assistant coach in the NBA. At $2 million a year is what Woj reported, which is insane. Like, it's just insane. That's an insane amount of money for an assistant coach. I'm happy for him and his family. And then Dave Fizdale, who is the second assistant coach, who was a former head coach, for those who remember, in the NBA as well. And reportedly by Gambo is making upwards of $1 million a year for an assistant coach, which is also crazy. Assistant coaches rarely, as far as we know, make over $1 million a year. So this is something that we've seen both of them do. I thought, I was waiting in this Frank Vogel press conference for him to even acknowledge the existence of Kevin Young. And it wasn't until he was asked about him that he did. And part of me was like, is he about to say, oh, Kevin Young, I can't wait to meet him? Because I'm like, these guys, I don't think they know each other. And to think about this, by the way, what Mat Ishbia is doing, what James Jones is doing, them together, I want to give them both credit, of hiring Frank Vogel at a pretty high amount. Don't let the Monty Williams coaching numbers fool you. A 5-year, $30 million contract for an NBA coach is a good amount of money for an NBA coach. But what they're doing that, and then taking the guy who appeared to have been in second place for the job, in Kevin Young, and immediately offering him to be the highest paid assistant coach in the NBA. I'm sure they consulted Frank Vogel, but I don't think it was necessarily Frank Vogel's choice. I think it was, hey, we want to hire you, and we want to hire this guy who was here last year and had the opportunity to be a head coach, to be your lead assistant. Is that okay with you, probably, is how they phrased it. And I think the pressure was, yeah, you better say yes, otherwise you might not have this job. And this is not a normal thing that happens. Usually head coaches get hired. They fill out their coaching staff with their own guys. Kevin Young is not his own guy. This is not to say that I'm concerned about this or anything. I'm not. But I did find it just a little bit odd that it just didn't come up at all in Frank Vogel talking about this team until he was asked about it. And then, of course, he acknowledges Kevin Young, and he was asked about the role for Kevin Young, and he said, I don't want to make any roles for my staff, but I was encouraged by what he did as the offensive coordinator for this team in the previous few years, which, by the way, sounded like somebody wrote on a piece of paper for him. These guys don't. To me, it seemed clear that these guys don't really know each other yet.
I don't. I think
it's just kind of weird. To me.
I think it's going too far to say that it sounded like someone wrote that on a piece of paper. I think the coaching network around the league.
I mean, he said what like Gambo said. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like there was no insight beyond what we all know about Kevin Young. You could have searched on Twitter and come up with that answer.
Okay, but it's the Frank Vogel introductory press conference. To be fair, it's not the Kevin Young press conference. So
yeah, of course,
he doesn't have that responsibility to necessarily like prop up Kevin Young like that in his own introductory press conference. I just think the coaching network is smaller than you think, and even if these guys don't directly know each other, the idea that they would have reputations to each other, to me, seems plausible. That's all.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I agree with you on the fact that I don't think this was Frank's decision per se. I mean, Kevin Young is not his guy. But am I concerned about it? No, to be honest. And
I'm not either.
And he said himself.
I do think it's just a different way of putting a staff together than most NBA teams do it.
I mean, you heard also Frank said himself in the presser, like, they know Kevin Young's going to go and be a head coach somewhere. Maybe that happens in another 3 years. Maybe it happens in 1 year.
But
they're just trying to squeeze the most value out of him while they still have him, and ironically get some continuity maybe out of that offensive system. Again, we don't know exactly what his role is going to be. I would imagine it's going to be pretty similar to the role he's already been playing with the team. But if I had to guess, I don't think he's going to be the defensive coordinator all of a sudden, but who knows?
Well, isn't that interesting though, right? This team had problems with offense and they're hiring the guy to be the assistant coach to do the same thing.
Yeah, but everything that we know, at least the rumors say that Monty and Kevin Young had some major disagreements about the offense.
This always happens when teams break up though, right? All the good decisions were by the guy that's still here, all the bad decisions are by the guy that's gone. And this is not to say that anything about that is not true, but I do find that funny, right? It's rose-colored glasses a little bit. And that's the time of year. Look, we're entering optimism season, so I'm gonna be there too once this is all settled. I tend to wait until the team is put together.
You better be.
To jump on that boat. Well, I like to be skeptical when we have the opportunity to disagree, but once it's all set, I can talk myself into anything. I'm happy. I want to say just to clarify that Kevin Young is staying. I think it's really good because I think it's pretty clear that Matt and James probably said, okay, we're hiring the guy that Devin Booker didn't ask for in Frank Vogel. Maybe Devin Booker really was pushing for Kevin Young. So we should try to keep Kevin Young too so that Book is happy that we still have a guy that he wants around. And they did that. And I think that's really good. If you have the ability of getting the guy you want in Frank and then keeping the guy the players want in Kevin Young, and then hopefully those guys are on the same page and working together with the main goal of winning a championship, there's really no better situation. And, we've talked to people who cover the Lakers and covered the Lakers with Frank Vogel in the past, like Tim Krangis, who's been on the podcast before when we played the Lakers in the playoffs. And his whole opinion of Frank Vogel is that Frank Vogel's a defensive genius that just needs an offensive coordinator to be successful.
To hold his hand.
Yeah. And look, I mean, that's what they have. And if he's right about that, that's kind of a perfect situation for them when it comes to Kevin Young. Now, do you have any other opinions on Kevin Young before I move on to Dave Fizdale?
Not particularly. Just, I am stoked for that signing in general that we kept him. I think it was basically an ideal best case scenario. So, and gets even better once I heard the Fizdale news.
It really is great, I think, with Dave Fizdale. Watching the NBA Finals, I made a joke on Twitter about where can we get some of that Heat culture because, my God, I mean, that last, by the way, not to go on a long tangent here, but that last Finals game, which was Sunday night, I believe, was just incredible. Just an amazing, amazing basketball game. So fun to watch. But, this Heat team continues to just outperform. And they did. They got a guy who coached on the Heat for 10 years in Dave Fizdale. And I understand some people think about Dave Fizdale and think about his shortcomings as a coach when he failed as a head coach, if you want to call it that. Yeah. The take that for data
Can we address that? Yeah, the take that for data thing. I mean, so he had two brief stints as a head coach, right? He had one full season with the Grizzlies, fired early the next season. Yeah. One full season with the Knicks, fired early the next season. I don't think was given a particularly fair shake in either of those situations. Do you have any?
The rosters weren't great.
Can we just do you remember that Knicks team that he coached, the 2016-17 or maybe it was 2017-18?
Not particularly.
Okay,
no.
Well, let's have some fun here. Fizdale coached a Knicks team that won 17 games. 18-19, sorry. They won 17 games, and then he was fired like 20 games into the next season. But on the 17-win Knicks squad that he had, do you even want to guess, or should I just tell you the top 5 scorers on that Knicks roster?
I don't think
you would not get a single one.
Was Carmelo Anthony still in the NBA?
This was 2018-19. He was in the NBA, but he was not on the Knicks.
Okay. Then who?
I don't think I don't think you're going to get a single one.
But I don't remember.
Okay, number 5. I'll go in backwards order. This is what David Fizdale had to work with as a head coach, all right? Number 5, Kevin Knox.
Oh, no.
Number 4.
It's already awful.
Number 4, Enes Kanter. Now Enes Freedom. At the time, Enes
not
Kanter.
To mention the other problems that he brings,
3, Dennis Smith Jr.
Yikes.
2, Emmanuel Mudiay. Number 1, leading scorer on the 2018-19 New York Knicks, Tim Hardaway Jr. at 18-point-something points per game.
Oh, my goodness.
This was worse, if you could believe it, than any of the Earl Watson, Jay Triano, Kokoshkov, because all those rosters for the Suns at least had Devin Booker. Booker. There is not a single redeeming quality of that Knicks roster. So it's like, take that season, like take that whole thing. This is what sucks about being a head coach. Take that for data and throw that data out the window. Like, imagine waiting 15 years as an assistant coach to get your shot as a head coach, and then you're just handed this steaming dog shit pile of a roster and asked to make something of it. It's not fair. And I can see why, by the way. I don't know Fizdale, like, personally what he's answered to the media or behind the scenes about this, but you can see why from there he took a season off. Then he goes to work with Frank Vogel in L.A., wins, or sorry, not the season that the Lakers won, but he goes for a season as an assistant coach with the Lakers. And from there, takes a job as an associate GM with the Utah Jazz. You can almost see why an experience as bad as that would maybe push a guy into a cushier front office role, because being a coach is really hard. And I feel like it probably took a lot in terms of pay and in terms of just speaking of the character of Frank Vogel to kind of coax him out from his current front office role with the Jazz and get him to come coach again.
Right. And from all accounts of the players that played on teams where Dave Fizdale was an assistant coach, they all seem to love him in that role. And he understands what it takes to be in that role, considering he was there for multiple championships in Miami during those runs. You know, LeBron famously loved Dave Fizdale. So, you know, I think with Dave, he's getting an opportunity to be in the chair where he was the most successful, and that's as an assistant coach. And look, you're looking at a guy who has multiple head coaching years, multiple championship years with teams that won championships, and now is your third assistant. That's a pretty good scenario for a team to have. And credit, I think, to Mat Ishbia and James Jones for doing this, because James Jones has a familiarity with Dave Fizdale. They know each other from James Jones's time in Miami. You know, he has a familiarity with Frank Vogel, as you said, because Frank and James joked about playing against each other in the playoffs in the past, where the Pacers took the Heat to 7 games, I believe, in the Eastern Conference Finals, and then of course the Heat ended up winning. So that's the coaching staff as we know it. And so now we have Frank Vogel, we got Kevin Young, highest paid assistant coach. Dave Fizdale might be the second highest paid assistant coach right now, based on what we saw about his reported salary. And let's take a quick break and let's talk about the guy that's paying these salaries, because I think that's where we got a good chance to talk about Mat Ishbia. We'll be right back.
Your kids could get free or low-cost health coverage from Medicaid or CHIP. Even if you've applied before, they may be eligible now. Kids up to age 19 are covered for checkups, vaccines, dentist visits, hospital care, and more. And if they already have Medicaid or CHIP, remember to renew every year. Visit insurekidsnow.gov or call 877-KIDS-NOW. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Okay, after the Frank Vogel press conference, Mat Ishbia was invited onto 98.7 Arizona Sports Radio to talk about Frank Vogel and his decision-making with the team so far. By the way, shout out to Matt for immediately ingratiating himself into sort of Arizona media and just using 98.7 as this bullhorn for him. Robert Sarver used to do it too. I think Robert Sarver had it was bi-weekly appointment with them where he went on the radio and spoke, where people were much less interested in those interviews than I think they're going to be in these Mat Ishbia interviews so far. I missed it live, but 98.7 posted it on ArizonaSports.com, and oh boy, was this interview crack for Suns fans, because my God, this dude, he has had so much energy, and he is so locked in on making this team as good as possible that it was just fascinating to listen to. You listened to it too, right?
Yeah, he's. I mean, it's only a 10 or 11 minute interview. He's kind of insane, and you talk about ingratiating himself with the fan base. That helps with the guy who's writing the checks. right? I mean, I don't know. So like you have some of the quotes here, but some of these quotes saying kind of the same stuff he said in the past about like they're not worried about money. The money will follow. But some of the consequences of that, of the types of expenditures that they're willing to have right now, is just super encouraging because he's kind of a madman.
Yeah.
I mean, he talked about, they want to have the best training staff.
Let's go through it. I got it all in order of when he talked about it, and there's a bunch of interesting stuff here. First thing that stood out to me, Matt said he only met with 5 candidates himself. The Suns interviewed significantly more than 5 candidates from what we know. But only 5 of them got to the point of meeting with Mat Ishbia. He also said he only met once with Frank Vogel 2.5 weeks ago. 2 Fridays ago is how he described it. And that was the only time he met and interviewed Frank Vogel. He said the decision was made the Tuesday after Memorial Day to hire Frank Vogel, and they moved on from there. To me, what stood out to that is... that I think gives a lot of credit to James Jones and his meetings with Frank Vogel as well, because I think Frank met multiple times with the team, but I guess one of them, or more than one of them, was without Mat Ishbia, because Mat Ishbia only met with him once. He also just very casually threw out the other 4 names of the candidates that he met with. Did you notice that?
Yeah, but they were the same names we expected, right?
Well, it was Nick Nurse, Jordy Fernandez, Kevin Young, and Doc Rivers. Yeah, so now we know for sure who the 5 finalists were, the ones that actually met with Mat Ishbia. It was Frank Vogel, Nick Nurse, Jordy Fernandez, Kevin Young, and Doc Rivers. The reporting has been by Gambo and Bill Simmons that Nick Nurse was not part of that final decision made, that they were not interested in him for the job. Woj has implied that Nick Nurse chose to not be with the Suns, even though the Suns wanted him. Now, I don't know who's right about that, but I would say that Woj is wrong, just based on the track record of this summer so far. But I did find it interesting that he mentioned those 5 guys, and he said, by the way, I love this part, championship pedigree from Frank Vogel is the reason he chose him, because he said not only has he won a championship, he won recently, not 20 years ago.
Yeah, this was such a Doc Rivers shot. I laughed out loud.
God.
That was so fucking funny.
He didn't win in 2008 like that old man.
It's not like he
Doc
won
Rivers.
20 years ago like Doc Rivers. That's just so funny.
I really love that. It's been less than 20 years, but it's been almost 20 years.
Who else was he talking about?
I don't know.
He wasn't talking about Nick Nurse. He wasn't talking about Jordy Fernandez. He was talking about Doc Rivers.
And he by the way, he threw in a nice compliment about Jordy Fernandez, called him a great young up-and-coming coach. They seem to really have liked Jordy based on everything that I've heard, and then the way he talked about him in that. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? All of this was interesting to me.
Again, the Doc comment is hilarious. I mean, Frank spoke extensively about how much the NBA is constantly changing and kind of how it's one of the challenges, I guess, if you're a longtime coach, that you need guys in your ear as part of your assistant staff, and you just need to be pushing yourself to continue making tweaks and continue changing, even if you're in the business for 15, 20 plus years. So it's just funny to me to think about, Doc did win a ring in 2008, but what the NBA looked like in 2008 and what the NBA looks like now is just night and day. And so, to Ishbia's credit, I do think winning a championship in 2020 versus winning a championship in 2008, part of it is just he gave us a funny soundbite. Part of it matters. It kind of is analysis that matters. So I don't blame him for taking that into account.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I liked that he said that. I just think, why is he doing it? Now, I don't know why he did any of this interview, to be honest, because then he was asked about DeAndre directly, and how much the decision to hire Frank Vogel was about picking a coach that could get the most out of DeAndre. And Mat Ishbia took a much different tact than Frank Vogel and responded by saying, Coach Vogel is going to be a great coach with the guys we put out on the court. Just completely blew over. He said that's not what it was about. We believe that he's going to be able to coach whoever we put out.
He did also make sure
court.
To say that Ayton could be a future superstar. I do want to put that out there.
Yeah, I just found it interesting that his first instinct was to say that was not the decision. Look, it would be so stupid. It would be so stupid to have Devin Booker and Kevin Durant on your team and hire a coach because you thought that coach was the best coach for DeAndre Ayton. That would be fucking insane. So if that's what you think happened here, you are dumb. I'm sorry. Like, that would be a really bad decision by an owner of a team to do. They have to maximize those two guys in order to win a championship. It's not about maximizing that third guy at the expense of the other guys. It's about maximizing the two guys at the expense of everyone else. Everyone else has to succeed around them. And, it's just kind of funny that he so quickly
hedge your
picked
bets
up on
a little,
that.
though.
And I think said the right thing.
Though, because it doesn't 100% mean the guy is gone either. Even if he's not necessarily being prioritized.
I don't.
And I agree.
I'm definitely less sure that Ayton's being traded now than when we did the Ayton trade podcast. I mean, are you there too?
Yeah, a little bit. I still think the likelihood. I mean, Ishbia kind of isn't. Ishbia is easier to read, but James Jones is kind of the guy I continue to take cues from when there is some readable information from him. And I don't know. I think James Jones is just still kind of a stone cold killer a little bit, and I think he's gonna gut this roster if I had to guess. But maybe I used to be 95% to 5%, and now I'm more like 85 to 15, thinking that Ayton's gonna be traded. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's a fair place to be. I think the Mat Ishbia interview, I think it probably more tipped the hat to what they're actually talking about behind the scenes than James Jones, who just doesn't really do that, does. Where I think Matt seems to imply that all options are on the table. He said, we're not letting money stop us from being successful. A direct shot at Robert Sarver. And he said he wants you mentioned this, he wants the best coaches, the best training staff, the best massage therapists, the best security staff, the best everything. And I love this part about that. He said, Frank's job is to be the best coach. James's job is to be the best GM. My job is to be the best owner. But the players' jobs are to be the best players. Just this expectation of the best possible version of yourself and of what he can pay for at all levels of the organization is what he's out there saying. And he's putting his money where his mouth is over and over again.
The best massage therapists. The best security people. Why stop there? Get us the best water boys in the industry. Get us the best pizza delivery people. Straight to Footprint Center. I love this quote. It's hilarious.
It's just so great.
Yeah, it's crack for Suns fans. To what extent is it true? I don't know, but it's fun. Who cares? Right.
This is the time where we get to analyze this stuff in great detail. He just casually said, teams have been calling about trades. Did you notice that?
Maybe. What did he say specifically?
It's just like in the middle of talking about this, he's talking about they need to do this, they need to do that.
I'm not sure I caught this part, actually.
Yeah, it's just very casually snuck in. Teams have been calling about trades, which of course they have. But I thought it was interesting that the onus, and of course he's not putting it on us, but he's putting that on other teams are calling the Suns about trades, which puts them in a good position for negotiating. And of course we know they're not calling about Devin Booker, right? They're not calling about Kevin Durant.
They'll be told no.
I mean, those phone calls don't go through. They know, right? So if
the
they're
Spurs
calling
the Spurs call right now and say number one pick for Devin Booker. What do you say?
No.
What about for Kevin Durant? What do you say? Victor Wembanyama for Kevin Durant right now. Do you do it? This is what off-season podcasting is about. Could you imagine? I have a feeling those are not the conversations. Those are not the conversations that the Suns are having over the phone right now. They're a lot more boring than that.
Yeah. We're not afraid. He mentioned this right after saying teams have been calling about trades. He said, we're not afraid to make big changes and big moves, whatever it takes to win a championship. You know, this whole idea that they're not going to do this or they're not going to do that, or they hire this guy to keep things status quo to run it back. It just flies in the face of everything he's saying, and he's the guy at the very top. You know, he seems to be implying that they're listening to calls on trades, and they're not afraid to make a big move in order to try to win a championship. And, you know, I don't know what they have. I don't know what they can put together. If they can pull a rabbit out of a hat in this offseason, I would find it to be surprising, to be the very least. But it sounds like they're out there. They're out there. They're trying to make the right moves. And look, I found today to be exciting. I'm less so impressed by the Frank Vogel press conference. I think like those kind of like, if you just had to like script what it was going to be like in your mind beforehand, like if you and I did a predict Frank Vogel press conference quotes, we would probably have been like 75, 80% right about the types of questions he was asked and how he answered them.
GPT beforehand, what is the Suns, what is the new Suns era of basketball going to be defined by? It might have spit something out like Frank Vogel is going to come in and with his scrappy brand of basketball, you know, like a lot of it, hard work,
toughness, intelligence, yeah. You know, so like less so by that, but I did find this particular interview by Mat Ishbia to be just a little bit more exciting, because it's one thing to say all of this without backing it up. It's another thing, I think, to say a lot of this stuff that we've seen him say after making two assistant coaches. You know, like a lot of teams just don't give a shit about that. Like this is going down the line here and paying money. And paying two assistant coaches, possibly the highest paid assistant coaches in the NBA, and doing that into this upcoming season, it hits a little different when you know that's what predicated this. And I don't know, I found myself
excuse to be really the hyperbole here, because it's definitely a little bit hyperbolic, but in the NBA, you know, head coaches are temporary, owners are forever. I mean, it was a long stint already under Robert Sarver. It took a lot to get him out. Frank Vogel, we're talking about a guy who's going to be here. I'm excited for this new era of Suns basketball. I hope he gets at least two. I'm setting the over-under at 2.5 seasons. I hope he gets at least his 3 seasons or so. It would be great if he got all 5. Again, we have not seen a coach get all 5 from the Suns in decades.
35, 40 years.
We're talking about essentially a presidential term is what we're getting out of Frank Vogel. Mat Ishbia might not relinquish this thing for 50 years. We really don't know.
Yeah. It's more of a monarchy.
Ishbia seems pretty excited about the potential of running. So we're kind of married to this guy. And if we're going to be married to a guy, at least he's saying the right things. At least he's really bringing that financial commitment.
Writing the checks, yeah. You know, we talked about it when we talked about the idea of keeping Kevin Young. I said, look, you can say all you want about it's being the best opportunity for him to, you know, bolster his resume before he becomes a head coach. But if you don't open up your checkbook to pay him, he's not going to stay. And, you know, they did it. So credit to them. I did, when thinking about listening to this Mat Ishbia interview, I did go on to the trade machine a little bit and just start playing around a little bit more. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to put in Landry Shamet and put in Campaign. I'm going to start looking around, and it's not easy, Sam.
What is that combined? Like that's like $16 million?
Yeah, it's approximately 60. It's like, it's about 16 exactly, I think. Because it's like 6.5 for Campaign and 9.5 for Landry Shamet. But coming up with the trade partner that makes sense, because you know what you're doing at that point is you're saying, all right, give me a young team who has an older player that probably doesn't want to be there anymore. We can give them 2 pieces. They can keep one, keep the other, whatever they want to do. And I don't know. The only thing I came up with, Landry Shamet Campaign for Gary Harris. That was like the best thing I could come up with. I'm like, maybe they do that. Orlando, I don't know.
Can we send Landry back to Detroit, where Monty is?
I definitely tried.
Landry, Cam.
Do we have both of those guys for Boyan? Give him Ish Wainwright,
a first round pick or whatever first round pick swap we have.
We don't. Yeah, maybe we can do
I think
swap.
We have swaps that we can still trade and get Boyan back, and you have a real legit role player next to your guys. I would do that.
It's not the worst. Yeah, I mean that would be a good use of salary for those 2 guys, but it's tough to justify it. I imagine Monty's going to like Boyan.
Yeah, well,
in Detroit.
He can be comforted by his pet project.
His favorite son. Yeah. We spent 2 podcasts, our previous 2 podcasts, main feed and Patreon, outside of the Frank Vogel hiring podcast, talking about trading Chris Paul. One thing we did not cover was the concept of Chris Paul returning to the Suns, but not at his full $30 million. And, you know, we've talked about this before. I think we talked about it with David when David was on the podcast at one point in the past. 2 years ago, probably.
David was kind of on this concept
I think it's just,
before anyone.
Yeah, he brought it up as a possibility a long time when he first signed his contract, you know. But I think it's been hinted at by possibly the two most connected Suns people at this point, which are Gambo and Windhorst.
Yeah,
Brian
a little
Windhorst,
who obnoxiously in the case of Windhorst. Did you listen to the pod that he did? It was
yeah. He refused to expand. He just left Zach Lowe just flopping in the wind. Didn't give him any
he did
details
it in
on
their post game 2 reaction pod where they spent like half an hour breaking down again what you said was an awesome game between the Heat and Nuggets, but then also wanted to, and this was funny to me as well because it must have been like midnight for them or something. So the fact that they did 10 or 15 minutes of Frank Vogel analysis at like the end of recording their pod, like you could tell. This is why I question the veracity of it a little bit, right? Because you could tell Windhorst was tired just by the tone of his voice. And I'm like, all right, Windy's getting a little tired. He might just engage into troll mode because I think he slips so easily in and out of it. But yes, people were talking about this again the other day because Windhorst was mentioning this possibility that what if the Suns can bring back Chris Paul? What if they don't need to pay him his $30 million? And it was not. Yeah. It's something that we've always known about as like, yes, technically it could happen, but it's so kind of in uncharted waters, so beyond the realm of expectations for what teams typically expect out of their players. It's just not something you see too often. You know, we talk often about the culture of ring chasing in the NBA. Ring chasing is something, this concept of you take unrestricted free agents who maybe could sign for $5 or $10 million somewhere, and they decide to sign for a veteran minimum to go win a championship somewhere. You know, that happens all the time. Ring culture has been covered extensively, or ring chasers, for close to a decade at this point, if not more. This particular situation with Chris Paul, whereby you would essentially waive him, hope he clears waivers, which he probably would after a period of 48 hours, and then re-sign him for a smaller contract, that is something completely different than ring chasing. It is something that, to my knowledge, yes, it is possible, but has never been done before. At least not at that level. So, yeah. You know, I think it's important that we talk about it because people are talking about it and because I think people are confused. But it's unlikely to me. It still feels unlikely.
Let's just break down what it means. Chris Paul, 30,800,000. It's such a huge number. Wait, no, that's 20. Yeah, 30,800,000 is what he's currently on the books for next year. $15.8 million of that is guaranteed. So no matter what, he's going to get paid $15.8 million this year. The Suns have, according to Hoops Hype, until June 28th to guarantee the rest of that money. If they waive him by June 28th, in order to really maximize what that means for the Suns, because we're talking about potentially building cap space, and we'll talk about what that means in just a second, they would have to essentially get him and his agent on board to re-sign on the Suns at a minimum deal, which is like probably like
for him, a veteran with his years of level. Service, yeah, probably around $3 million.
Yeah. And that's asking a lot of Chris Paul. It's asking him to basically sacrifice, I guess, what would it be? 14, 15, 16 million,
well,
17
so
instead
of making the $30 million, he gets 15 plus 3. He's sacrificing like $12 million.
12 million, yeah. So yeah, about $12 million. And the idea would be that he would open up some money for the
not
Suns
cap
to sign a free
space.
agent.
The Suns will not have cap space
because the Suns
they
are
way over the cap. So I just want to be very clear about that principle. The money that Chris Paul would be opening up is maybe some of these other resources that the CBA allows you in the form of cap exceptions when you're over the cap. The taxpayer mid-level exception, essentially being the big one, but not cap space. We are not opening up cap space even if we do this.
Do you want? Have you looked at free agents?
No, I haven't gotten there yet. I mean, I have.
Okay,
I looked
I.
at the list like most recently a couple weeks ago, but it's hard to know right now if they're going to have a mid-level or not. So I haven't, none a bit.
Let's just say Dylan Brooks, for the sake of understanding.
I really
this
hate Dylan Brooks. Can you choose any other name? Can you choose any other name?
Dylan Brooks is the funniest name. I'm sorry. It's hard for me to come up with other guys. But here's how you would have to phrase it to Chris Paul, to me, in order to get them to do it. And let me look at other names. Let's see. Dylan Brooks is on here. Taylor Horton Tucker, no. Jay Crowder is on here. Wouldn't be a bad player under Frank Vogel.
To be clear, are you looking at guys right now? You're looking at mid-level options?
I just brought up the free agent.
But is that what?
Just kind of scrolling around. Let's say Grant Williams. Not that he would sign at that tax-paying mid-level, but let's say he would. Just throwing it out there that he would. You're essentially asking Chris Paul, will you be willing to sacrifice $12 million so the Suns can sign Grant Williams? You know?
Yeah. And just to be clear to people,
if they would do that.
The contract that we're talking about, the taxpayer mid-level that would be preserved for the Suns is a starting salary of about $7 million a year. You can sign a player up to 3 years. For reference, it's the contract that the Miami Heat currently have Caleb Martin on that they signed him to last summer. He's one of the most important players on a potential championship team right now. So, like, that's the potential value of that contract. You could say no big deal. And in a lot of cases, yeah, guys who signed for $7 million are no big deal. A lot of times they flame out. They don't even play in a playoff rotation. But if you hit on the right guy, the difference between that $7 million player and a $2 million player that you signed for a minimum contract, which is otherwise all the Suns are going to have access to, that could be a big difference. Maybe even if it's Dylan Brooks, who I don't like.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of it either. Just not a smart player and just a guy who talks too much. But, it's to me, it would be cool if Chris Paul did that. I just don't really see a scenario where
what's in it for him is what you're asking, and the answer is a championship ring, which is what he wants.
I don't want people to twist this into Chris Paul's keeping us from a championship ring, though. Because the Suns signed him to this contract. It's on them too. They signed him to this contract, and if they can't convince him to do it, it's on the Suns. They can trade him if they want at that point. Guarantee it. Trade his whole $30 million. Try and get something of value for his whole $30 million. Because that's the other option, right? After it's guaranteed, which is right before free agency, because free agency is the first week of July. Right before free agency, they can guarantee it. Now they're knowing what they're looking at in free agency. If they can trade Chris Paul, bring back less salary, then they can open up the taxpayer mid-level exception too. Or DeAndre Ayton or both of them and bring back less salary from both of them. Maybe they can bring or open it up that way as well. But I don't necessarily think Chris Paul saying no to this and saying no to potentially Dylan Brooks, for example, is the difference between the Suns getting a ring and not. But you know what? Maybe it is.
Also,
I don't know. One of those guys can make a big Caleb Martin, as you mentioned, can make a big difference. But hitting on Caleb Martin is a once in a generation.
It's not a once. Caleb Martin is awesome.
When was the last time a taxpayer mid-level exception player scored the second most in a conference
the
final
series?
They're
a really weird team. They're a really weird.
That's what I'm saying. It just never happens.
Yeah, I mean, but you can get a play. In the sense that what is Caleb Martin averaging in the playoffs? 15 points per game. It's weird that they're succeeding this much.
Okay, Jordan Clarkson.
What is that a question?
If you're asking Chris Paul, hey, Chris Paul, will you sacrifice $12 million so the Suns can sign Jordan Clarkson to a 3-year, $22 million deal?
I mean, I'd be cool with that. Would Chris be cool with that? Yeah,
would Chris Paul,
I don't know.
Is my question.
No
yeah. That's the question. I don't know if that's worth it. You really have to make a convincing case. And look, Dylan Brooks is not the convincing case that you would need it to be. And maybe Jordan Clarkson would be, or a player like Jordan Clarkson. We're going to do a free agency breakdown once we have an idea of what the Suns... It might just be minimum guys. That might be what we're facing if they don't make any trades before free agency.
It's going to be tough. Also...
Yeah, they got a month, Sam.
We also just have to mention, this entire idea that Windy or whatever is hinting at, it all hinges on the notion that when the Suns waive Chris Paul, no one can claim him. Because
right.
any of the other 20 and that idea might seem
Yeah.
preposterous to a lot of people, but it only takes one. What's to say that the Suns waive Chris Paul? They want him to clear waivers so that they can get him back in a few days. What's to say that the San Antonio Spurs, who have a buttload of cap space and have no idea what they're going to do with it, don't just call our bluff and say, fuck you, Phoenix. And they pick up Chris Paul's contract just to have him even at $30 million for the 1 year so that they could have a veteran presence next to Wemby or something. And then they can get rid of him the next year. It's not like it's not going to be the difference between them winning a championship next season or not, but it's something that they could totally do. There are only a few teams that have that level of cap space that they could do that. But if those few teams wanted to screw with us and just employ Chris Paul, one of the greatest point guards ever, for a single season, they could absolutely do that if the Suns decide to waive him.
It's very true. Chris Paul, I think, is one of the rare players who's been around the NBA long enough that he probably has more control over what happens with his destiny than most players, in that if the Suns trade him, they probably want him to be okay with where he's traded. And if he goes into the waiver wire, I think he can probably tell a team, don't you dare sign me. And they'll probably just be like, all right, cool, we won't sign him. But you never know. It just takes one team.
If I were Popovich, I would test it. I think that would be hilarious. I would test it.
Well, all I know is that if the Suns are considering it, Woj will come out with a report that a team is gonna sign Chris Paul, whether or not it's true, just so they can stop the Suns from doing it, because he works for the agents. Anything else you got before we end this one?
Don't
covered
think
a lot.
So. Got a little bit about coaching. Got a little bit from the front office ownership. Covered the Chris Paul angle at the end. This was a multi-layered podcast. It was fun. A new era begins. Let's get scrappy.
Yeah.
Let's get fun.
A new era begins.
Let's get all the best massage therapists.
The Frank era. They got to get the best massage therapists, the best security staff, the best popcorn people, the best nachos people. Get his old friend Charles Barkley back on his side so Frank Vogel and him can be friends again. But thanks everyone for listening. I'm going out of town. I haven't told you this, Sam. I'm going out of town Thursday until Sunday, so I don't think we're going to have a Patreon episode this week, but if we could squeeze one in before I leave, we'll try. If not, we'll be back next week. If you'd like to join the Patreon, it's patreon.com/thetimeline. You can join our Discord until we have another episode out sometime in the next week. But we thank you everyone for listening and look forward to covering the rest of the season with you. We'll be back very, very soon.
Your kids could get free or low-cost health coverage from Medicaid or CHIP. Even if you've applied before, they may be eligible now. Kids up to age 19 are covered for checkups, vaccines, dentist visits, hospital care, and more. And if they already have Medicaid or CHIP, remember to renew every year. Visit insurekidsnow.gov or call 877-KIDS-NOW. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.